used for a number of reasons. They're cheap, lightweight, easy to make, and just have so many uses currently in our everyday lives. But they're also not truly disposable. We think they are, and we dispose of them, but what happens is plastics break down, and as they break down, what we see is that they become microplastics. And these microplastics can become 5 millimeters or smaller. And the ocean is full of them, which means that they're full of these tiny microplastics that are harmful in a number of ways. We've tried to address this by reducing, reusing, and recycling, as we've learned to do, but it's just not enough. And on the next slide, I'll be able to talk more about the reasons for that. We know that we've already got so much on our plate. We're dealing with many issues with globalization, international issues. We're dealing with coronavirus, human rights, social justice. There are a lot of things on our plate. So microplastics often are not a big focus for us. And because they're not visible, literally or figuratively, we don't take them very seriously. So what are microplastics? They are byproducts of plastic products. And anytime a plastic is produced, they can come down to and be microplastics. So they do slowly break down over time. Plastics have a number of different chemicals inside of them, which slows the breaking down of those plastics, but which means that they'll also last in the ocean far longer than we would have intended. And there are products that are added to plastics so that they're heat resistant, that they don't easily suffer from oxidation. And what it means is they become biotoxic. And the reason that we're talking about this is, for example, that there are several issues why it's so dangerous. They are again, 5 millimeters or smaller. They're easily ingested by marine organisms, and they can seep into sediments or float and can go into a number of different places. As they're swallowed by these marine organisms, they continue to be shared in the environment. As they seep into sediment, as they seep into our sand through the water, plastics are now places that they should not be. And what we found is that there are microplastics all over the world, even in the ice cores that we see in Antarctica. There are plastics everywhere. And as animals consume them, as they go into the sediment, that means that these microplastics are not just limited to one space, and it means that there's no way for us to control and address all of them at this point. There is a lack of standard procedure and protocol of what to do with these for sampling, for identification purposes, and that means that no one's following the same methodology. And that means that we're not able to do appropriate calculations to understand their sizes, to understand the full impact. So we don't have clear data. Data and statistics are at this point not on our side. That lack of data creates continued harm. We need to allow for collaboration, to have a standard protocol for sampling, for identification, and then we'll be able to do more. Numbers are powerful, statistics are powerful, and as long as they're not on our side, that's going to continue to harm us. Now, quickly to ask all of you, what do you think some of the solutions are? I'm going to stop the PowerPoint and see what people have to say. What do you think some of the solutions are for this? Yes, Joshua.
I'm thinking we should cut down plastics and get reusable glassware to hold common stuff like toothpaste and floss and mouthwash tablets. Because if we get rid of all that, we could minimize that part in our life.
Absolutely. You bring up a good point, having alternatives to plastic, and people are currently trying to find alternatives, but it's not working at this point. So many people go back to plastic because of how easy and convenient it is both to use and produce. These alternatives are great, and they do, though, sometimes consume a lot more time and resources and are more expensive. So people tend to go back to plastics, and that's part of our consumer culture. Consumer culture, especially in the United States, is one wanting instant gratification, wanting to buy what we want now, and plastics are the cheaper way to do it. So when we come up with alternatives and they're more expensive, people are resistant to them. And that's an issue, right? This is our culture is a culture of plastics. And so it's a cultural shift we have to make in order to address that, in order to include the alternatives that Joshua mentioned. I see Brooke made a comment in the chat. Yes, absolutely. Education. Sometimes we think that it's not a big deal to use a plastic water bottle or a piece of plastic anymore. We don't realize how much plastic is in every part of our lives and in our waste management systems. If we improved our waste management systems, that would be great. But at this point, they're not handled appropriately. And so a lot of our waste ends up in the ocean. And what's in the ocean? I mean, we have to think about, because the ocean is a huge buffer for climate change. It's so much a part of our environment. What ends up in the ocean can have catastrophic effects on our planet. So what can we do as individuals? As I mentioned, we can, oh, sorry about this. As you all have mentioned, as I've mentioned, we can reduce, reuse, and recycle, though recycling honestly isn't working, and I'll let the next presenters talk about that. But recycling consumes a lot of money and time, and many people do throw plastics in the trash with food or other things stuck to them, and someone has to clean them. We also have to separate different types of plastics into different containers to be able to address all of the chemicals and additives in them. The cleaning of them, the sorting of them often then leads to issues with emissions. And so in terms of large scale permanent change, this will not be effective. We can individually reduce our own plastic use, but doing this as individuals may not be enough. We need systemic change. We need policy change to forbid the use of plastics in order to see a true lasting change. At this point, money wins. So how do we make sure that we do this, turn money in our favor? How do we do this economically? What do you think? What do you think? How can we turn this to our favor? Joshua?
In Connecticut, there is a way where you could bring all your plastic and cans into a machine, and you could get money back from that. And we could use that as an increase in we could use that as a popularity because everyone wants money.
Mm-hmm.
So by me drinking a can of soda and going to the machine, I make 5 cents out of my drink. And if you do the calculations, it should add up to like breaking even most of the time if you do it correctly.
Right? No, exactly. And is that something that is sustainable for the long term, right? We want to be able to do that. We want to see that and what else we can do, because at this point, our way of living is not sustainable for our planet at this point, for our lives. Plastics are not sustainable, and we have to figure out how to address that. And it always comes back to money. Who's funding these projects? Who's funding the alternatives? Who's paying shipping costs? That's very important to consider. And I see that Kirk has said that DC has had a big drive to stop people from putting plastic bags, wrap, et cetera, into recycling because they mess up the sorting equipment. That's a great point, right? There are times when recycling seems like our quick and easy answer, but in application, it's not very practical. Right? I'll share my PowerPoint again.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I had seen that Brooke had her hand up, so I didn't know if Brooke wanted to make a comment.
It's okay. We can proceed with the presentation.
No, Brooke, yeah, go ahead. And if you'd like to turn your camera on and ask something, be happy to have you. Okay.
I have my camera off at the moment.
Sure.
In terms of I'm also from Connecticut. So something that we've done sort of on a smaller scale, I know everyone hates taxes, but we now have a plastic bag tax that we put in place July of last year, which charges people 10 cents per bag. Mm-hmm. And people from Connecticut hate taxes. So it's kind of forced everyone to bring in their own reusable bags.
Oh, yeah, good point. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's working. And we still need to figure out that's reducing the use. And we have to figure out how we can reduce and really eliminate the use of plastics to get to a point where we're at essentially a zero plastic environment. So in terms of solutions with microplastics, there is nothing right now that is our simple golden answer. We have to look at what we have right now in terms of production and see how we can address this on a global scale. So again, my proposal is that we standardize protocols for sampling and identification, and that we get the data that we need. At this point, people aren't taking microplastics seriously. So our first step is to make sure that we have standard protocols for identifying and sampling and make sure that we have the data on our side. Then we can try and collect plastics and pollution that's already in the ocean, although it's very challenging to do that because we haven't handled this appropriately and because our waste management systems have not been effective. We can try to burn and bury it, but we have to think about climate change and emissions, CO2, and the impact of that as well on our environment. We can try and recycle pre-existing plastics. And I'll talk more about that on the next slides, but right, recycling is a good idea and it's not something that we should stop, but it's not very effective overall. So it's important that we're looking at systemic change for plastics and to reduce our plastics to our plastic use and our making of new plastics to zero and make sure that we comply on that on a global scale and that we address our waste management systems. We could actually, if we handled waste management better, reduce our emissions of plastic in the ocean by 55%. So what we need to do is think about how what we're doing affects our environment, how this impacts everything from the ocean to our cars to everything in our space and how we can address that. Bottom line, no more plastic. And these are my references. Any more comments, questions?
Yeah, so bringing up the economic issue, I don't know how many of you here, and I apologize that my dog's now barking in the background again. So hopefully you can hear me over his howling. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the comedy Seinfeld. Obviously used to be one of the most popular TV shows ever. And now you guys are so young. I don't know if you've binged it or have seen it streaming online, but there's actually a very funny and famous episode where you can, you have to make a 5-cent deposit whenever you buy a can or a bottle. But in some states, it's a 10-cent deposit that you get back when you recycle. So the entire episode was centered around the idea that people would try to take all the bottles and cans from one state where the deposit was only 5 cents and transport it to a state where the deposit was 10 cents and actually make money off of the recycling of these cans and bottles. So it's just a really funny take on, how to actually incentivize people to recycle through, offering them an extra 5 cents above and beyond the deposit they put down.
Right. And now with everything being online with the pandemic, right, we should be trying to use our power of the media, of the platforms we have out there, using TV shows, movies, and other ways to get people's attention and social media, to educate people, to talk more about these issues, to have policies put in place, and we can use all of our resources appropriately. We just have to learn how to do that and do it to the fullest extent. Anyone else have any other comments or questions?
I was wondering about the poor animals who ingest all of those particles. I was wondering if you could explain what happens to them as a result. I mean, are they able to eliminate it, or does it kill them? What happens?
Well, when they ingest it, It generally doesn't have an immediate direct impact if there's a few things, but it's when it's accumulated over time that it becomes a problem. The microplastics are toxic to them. They're biotoxic because of the chemicals and additives added to them in order for them to last longer. And they've been made to be heat resistant or resistant to mold. And those chemicals then do harm the animals over time. And so at times they can eliminate it, but at times it does cause death. And then the plastics that were in their bodies when they do die, then will go onto the ocean floor, into the sediment, break down there, and potentially are then harming the environment again when other animals ingest it or they become part of the ocean floor sediment. So really, they still end up in the ocean and never leave. And I see the question from Kirk Van Gilder asking, do we have any microplastic eating microbes for plastic yet? Not yet. I wish that was something we could create. Brooke?
I'm not sure if we touched on this, but I think an interesting topic to kind of align with this is the cycle of microplastic. By myself, I'm a vegetarian, but I know plenty of people eat fish. What about the impact of fish eating microplastics and us in turn eating the fish? You know, small fish eats bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you get the tuna, and everyone eats tuna. That's a big fish.
Right. Right. That's certainly an issue as well. And biomagnification, essentially, we're right. They eat the plastics, we eat them, which eats something else. And that process means, yes, there's an accumulation of plastic over time. It just magnifies it. And that is another concern. Absolutely. No other comments or anything else? Maybe we can turn it over to Joshua.
But before we turn over to Joshua, something else that I've noticed, especially in terms of the economics of recycling. I believe it was Joshua who brought up the idea that some states are now charging you to buy bags if you're not bringing your own reusable bags. So that's something that's been instituted in New York as well, where you have to pay 5 cents per paper bag that you need when you buy groceries. Well, the plastic bags that we used to get from buying groceries and stuff would become our garbage bags. Unfortunately, paper bags don't really work as well as garbage bags. You know, a lot of times you might be throwing away things that might be a little wet, a little bit damp. The paper gets wet and damp, the paper rips, and now you got garbage everywhere. We were away recently and I had thrown some coffee grounds into a paper bag only to see the coffee grounds to eat through the paper. Coffee grounds went everywhere. And we were in a place that was relatively warm, and then suddenly ants started appearing. So one of the consequences of not being able to have plastic was now the fact that we actually have to buy plastic trash bags. My wife and I never used to buy plastic trash bags because we would just get the plastic bags from shopping and we would reuse those as our garbage bags. So now we're actively having to buy plastic. Now, when I went to go to buy plastic when we got back home, I was looking for biodegradable solutions and, you know, plant-based garbage bags as opposed to the standard plastic-based garbage bags. But those solutions are still relatively in their infancy. They're still relatively expensive compared to the normal plastic. So the question is, how do we now incentivize people to start using some of these alternative materials? I don't know if you have done any research or reading into those options.
Yeah, I do want to mention, right, this transition to alternatives is going to be challenging, and it's going to take a lifetime to get to alternatives that are effective, partially for financial reasons, or right, for those who live in small apartments or in other spaces where there are times where they need to use plastics or something disposable. So it's going to take a lot of time to look at those. And I think the best option for us is to start with kids to think about these things and things that seem like not a big deal, but, you know, having bamboo toothbrushes instead of plastic toothbrushes, and all of those things collectively can have an impact. Joshua?
I did the Madison Green Work project for my 300 course, which got me here, basically, I like to say. And one of my peers did a talk about hemp and how hemp is going to be the future for paper and plastic. And he was talking about maybe we could replace the plastic we use that's not recyclable to hemp plastic. And maybe that could lead into the new garbage bags. But I think we have to wait for hemp to get passed in all 50 states before that starts. It's sad to say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So does anyone have any additional thoughts or questions or comments concerning what Dakota has presented? Well, I want to thank you, Dakota, for a very interesting and enlightening presentation. You really did a fantastic and wonderful job.
Thank you.
And we will definitely have more time for discussion and questions and answers at the end after Joshua presents. So Joshua, we now turn it over to you and Melvin to have your presentation. And I apologize, I actually closed my screen for a second. Your presentation about the failure of recycling.
Okay, 1 second, please. Sorry.
No worries.
I want to make sure I see all your faces in my other screen. Okay, before we start, I would like to say thank you, Dakota, on your presentation. I know a little sign language. I'm not the best, so I can't sign the whole thing, but I just want to say thank you. Okay, so failure of recycling and recycling overall. My name is Joshua Anthony Gonzalez. I'm a dual major in computer software engineering and mathematics with a minor in forensic science and a certificate in cybersecurity. And my friend Melvin Temu is a dual major in biochemistry and mathematics, who's pursuing a doctorate degree in the future. Recycling. Recycling is everyday life. Recycling could be done from making plastic houses out of bottles in Tanzania to throwing away a simple can in a blue bin.
Recycling. So recycling is a process of collecting and processing that will otherwise be thrown away as trash and turning them into new products. So this process is a great way to improve the environment and fight against the current climate crisis. And the United States, according to the Environment Protection Program, EPA, has significantly improved its recycling program from less than 7% in the 1960s to currently 32%. Although this is a great accomplishment, there is still a long way to go because about 75% of America's waste is still recyclable. And one of the starting recycle facts is that in the United States, recycling accounted for 681,000 jobs and produced 37.8 billion in wages and 5.5 billion in tax reviews. Now, before we go on, I want to just put a disclaimer that please pay attentive to especially the facts that are going to be presented to other presentations, because those facts will be key in terms of answering the questions towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, as you can see in a simple picture like this, recycling is a diverse thing in the world. People like to say people do recycling differently. Like in Japan culture, they have different color bins on the street on every corner, from cardboard to batteries, and everyone's different color. Glass is red, cans are green, and so on and so forth. And look how happy if we teach younger children more about recycling. They see everything as a happy thought when they're younger. And hopefully in the future, they'll keep the happy thought going and change the world throughout recycling. The benefits of recycling. We could reduce landfills and incinerators. And incinerators causes air pollution in the ozone and it depletes it. Conserves natural resources such as timber, water, and minerals. We could increase our forest rate and basically help something simple like the rainforest by just putting paper in the recycle bin, because everything can be reused, reduced, and recycled. Economic security by tapping a domestic source of material. We don't have to worry about relying on stuff like, oh, I need to grow more plants in my house so they could cut them down, and then the economy is going to go up because I have to pay for those people to cut my plants. We could lower that lower that by just having a simple recycling plant that does everything individual and just recycles the material that we have already used. Prevents pollution by reducing the need of collecting new raw materials. Stumping machines that grind stumps uses gas. Some chainsaws mostly people use are gas powered, and it's more of a oil sense that we're going to be losing. And I know people are going to say, oh, you can just do electric chainsaws. They're not that powerful compared to the gas ones, I'm sorry to say. We could saving the energy we put out for cutting down trees or making new plastics. We could just use it towards recycling the plastics and paper. Supporting American manufacturing and conserves valuable resources. We don't need to waste all our resources on simple things like paper and trees, and like we don't have to export them to other countries. We all work together in recycling. We could all export each other simple things that are torn down by nature, like a broken tree, or sadly a forest fire could be used to help with deforestation, because too much forest is sometimes bad. But we don't want to do it by ourselves as man. We want to let nature take its course. And the jobs it's creating in the United States, if we do more recycling and more ways to help people plan for recycling, we can increase the job rate by having teachers talk about recycling in the classroom, having the plant workers do more about reduce, reuse, recycle, and help crush and mineralize, then reform these materials back to paper, plastic, and glass. The recycling benefit fact, it takes 95% less energy to recycle aluminum than it does to make a new raw material. Furthermore, recycling steel saves 60% of production energy, and recycling newspaper, 40% recycled plastics, and 70%, and recycled glass is 40%, which is really interesting to know.
So now recycling in America, has made progress, but the industry still faces like a lot of problems. And these problems include like massive pollution near the sites and bad working conditions, for minimum pay at those recycling industry plants. And furthermore, a lot of those investments in recycling, distracts the society from other meaningful solutions as well to deal with waste. And these solutions are such as circular design and green chemistry. Circular design and green chemistry, this is just focus on decreasing the amount of waste of consumption in general and making environmentally friendly products, because recycling is more of a delay from putting the toxic waste back into the environment. We just kind of trying to find different ways to reuse the same toxic waste that we produced in the first place. But if we able to actually, use products that aren't as toxic in the first place, that would eventually be more, that will in the long run be more successful in terms of, making that change towards recycling. And it's kind of like, unfortunately, it's kind of like recycling possesses a little of like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it does kind of decreases the waste usage, but at the same time, during that process, it creates other problems as it's in itself. And the second factor for this one would be that the United States ships and exported about 436 million kilograms in 2019, and is still exporting over 5,600 shipping containers that contain about like 30 million kilograms of plastic waste every month to countries with high waste mismanagement. And this is a really big problem.
As you can see from this picture, this is what exporting plastic looks like, and this is next to a waste dump. You can see this root beer, Mountain Dew, Sierra Mist. It's like every type of plastic bottle you could ever think of. Destruction by recycling. The increase in recycling plants will increase air pollution due to the exhaust pipes in every plant of recycling. Having another day just to pick up recyclables causes even more air pollution because of the heavy duty trucks that we are given. And the trucks have an exhaust system that produces more carbon dioxide pollution than us actually talking through this presentation. And the exposure to the chemicals and the combustion dust and the machine guarding hazards, and every powerful equipment in that plant affects the person who's working, and like they'll lead through causes through sometimes cancer to like smaller issues like heavy duty asthma or just regular asthma. The training that's given at these plants, are really sad to say, has not been improved since recycling has started, I feel like. So most of the time they just throw you on the plant and just tell you to move stuff around, which isn't really a good idea. And wastelands like landfills, I'm sorry to say, is less expensive than recycling plants, and it's all due to money, production, and machine power through electricity.
Welcome, Midan. So we can add filtration system to the exhaust pipe for the recycling plants, and to solve the issue of exhaustion pollution, we can also make all recycle truck like electrical recycling trucks, again, like kind of more innovative, intervention. And of course, more information and education to the kids, because, as we educate and foster, children that are very concerned about the environment, the world that we live in. And it's kind of like how we are right now. The more education and information is given out, the more involvement and participation it is towards the problem, and we're able to get even more solutions. Even in the previous presentation, I forgot who's recommended, they talked about plastic eating microbes. Ideas like those didn't just kind of come out of nowhere. Things like this happen to osmosis. It's like, because we're concerned about the environment and the negative effects of plastics, people can come up with different solutions such as those, which, even though we don't have that type of technology as of now, but since those ideas are coming up, maybe one day, someone can come through and, bring this, innovation to light. And also the other things we can do is, use social media to get the word out. And because, even us as a younger generation, social media is pretty much everything. And you can, engage, like, it's very easy to, either create a trend, a movement just through social media and stuff, whether it be Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and all the other, social media platforms. And the other thing is decreasing consumption of products, especially plastics, and then, carrying metal water bottles or mugs. So instead of, the regular 40-pack plastic water bottle, try to carry that one bottle, and finding, like a filtered system in the house and stuff, which I know, even though it's inconvenient and stuff at a time, you're only buying a couple of 1 or 2 water bottles that will last you even longer, because you're gonna reuse the same thing. Like, simple habits like those come a long way in terms of, making recycling possible. And another thing we do is compost all food scraps, and get, better assortment in terms of, like, recycling, compost, and all these other ways into comes just kind of like separate waste. All right.
To add on to Melvin, if you go to BJ's, it's a shopping center near me, you can see that a 40-pack of BJ's water is $3. But if we take one step at a time by just recycling plastic, maybe you could drop the inflation of $3 water to $2 water. I know people are gonna say, oh, what Dakota said, what about the microplastics stuff? And like, this is just one step leading to, hopefully, we start producing cheaper metal for metal water bottles given out, and more people would buy that, and we could use it to recycle it. And myself, Melvin, and 2 other peers of mine are taking the SCU 300 course, and our environmental project was fixing recycling at our campus. And we talked about adding a compost bin near the cafeteria and creating new fertilizer to increase our greenhouses, and adding more water fountains where people could fill up their waters near the sports centers and in common areas. And hopefully we're going to get done where we could add a water fountain for people in our dormitories. And all this can be done if one person speaks to another person, and you play the game telephone, but like actually say the correct information through facts, through social media, and getting your way out there. And the last thing I want to say is, for information to kids, the one thing I learned this once a year in elementary school is Earth Day. We learned everything about Earth Day in one day, but isn't every day Earth Day? Like every day is Mother's Day. You have to treat the earth like you treat everyone else correctly. And that's basically how I feel.
Now, it's time for the questions. Now, what do you remember about this presentation? First question is, how many jobs are created by the recycling industry? Is it A, 650,000, 650,000, B, 660,000, C, 700,000, or D, 681,000? Is there any volunteers? Answer the first question.
Dr. Roman, I'm sorry you cannot volunteer because we presented this to you yesterday.
Is there anyone
in the chat? Let's check the... Melvin, do you mind checking the chat in case anyone put anything in the chat?
I'm checking in the chat right now.
Thank you.
Come on, guys. You can even try to guess. You know, come on.
It's someone said D.
All right, and you're correct. It's Kirk. I believe his name is Kirk. Awesome. All right, now we'll go on to the second question. All right, the second question says, what percent of Americans' waste is recycled? Is it A, 30%, B, 75%, C, 32%, or D, 60%?
Someone said C, Melvin.
Awesome. It's good to know that people are paying attention. Yeah, great job, Ashley. It is C. The answer is C. All right. Now, then the third question is, how much money did the recycling industry make in wages? Is it A, 60 billion, B, 37.8 billion, C, 40 billion, or D, 50 billion? Does anyone else want to volunteer? You can also shout it out. It's okay.
Da na 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 da na 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 na.
I don't remember exactly, but I'm gonna guess B.
Awesome. Yes, that is correct. It is B. It was 37.8 billion.
Nice job, Ashley.
Good job. Good going.
How much did the U.S. ship waste to other countries in 2019? A, 436 million kilograms. B, 476 million kilograms. Did I say that twice? I did. My bad. A is 436. My bad. Sorry, everyone. C, 500 million kilograms, or D, 350 million kilograms.
It's a little of a hard one. Which one is it? Jennifer said nope, no. Come on, guys, anybody?
Brooke and Kirk said B.
B, that was so close, very close, but that is not the answer. Anyone else? Second chance. What do you think is the answer? Oh, nice. Yes, it is A, Jennifer. It is A. So it was 436 million kilograms that, that the United States shipped waste in 2019. Okay.
What percentages of energy is saved when recycling aluminum? 95%, 60%, 70%, or 40%? Jennifer said A, Katie and Emmanuel said A, and Brooke said A. Is that correct, Melvin?
Is it? Yes, it is. Awesome. You guys are being awesome.
Melvin, you have to sound a little confident.
No, it's like for a minute, I'm like, they're all saying A, but the question was never asked in the video. They answered before the question was even asked. I'm like, all right.
They're too smart for us, Melvin.
Yeah.
Last question. What were some of the failures of recycling mentioned in this presentation?
I'll also put it up in the chat. These failures can just be more than what we just said in the presentation.
Recycling is weak. We don't assist people to understand the process, economics, or work involved, and it becomes a distraction to other solutions.
Awesome.
Education regarding it, we only learn about Earth Day once a year. Definitely education. Perfect. So this is the questions we want to ask you guys. Do you recycle? Does your school recycle? What will you do to help fix the recycling problem in life? And will you take a stand and put out something to help recycle? Then we could exit out of sharing and we could just talk.
I could answer the questions, but do you mind actually just sharing again?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
So answers to those questions. I do recycle. I believe my school recycles as well. And to fix the recycling problem, I think what I can do as an individual is to just keep doing what I'm doing. And since like in education, that aspect is kind of lacking, work to educate other individuals about recycling and standing up to take a stand on the issue. Once again, I think going back to the individual level, what we say to people, how we talk about the narrative when it comes to recycling, I think can be a really important aspect in making this world a better environment, metaphorically and physically.
That's really good to hear. Thank you, Ashley. Kirk said something in the chat. One thing I've been trying to do is get more of the bottle filling stations built into drinking fountains on campus. A vast majority of our drinking fountains made it impossible to refill bottles, so people buy and carry plastic bottles. I really like to hear that, Kirk. That's really good to hear.
We have a similar problem in our campus too, where all the water fountains are like in one building. And so if you would have tried to, carry around, the metal bottles, is very inconvenient, because if it's at nighttime and stuff and the building is closed, then no access to the water.
Melvin, there's always the breaking in option, and you could say we're just saving the planet.
Right.
Dr. Roman, you have a question? I saw your hand up.
No, I just wanted to mention that my husband and I have we started a compost pile decades ago. We're in suburbia, but you can get tasteful compost bins, and we reduced our waste to one plastic bag of garbage a week by doing so, putting the coffee grinds in there and all the vegetable matter. But of course, I realize it's such a big problem, and I think about it all the time in terms of cities. people who are living, in the middle of New York City, they don't have this access to having a compost pile. But I was wondering constructively how good it might be to really push the community gardens. And then maybe people could take I was thinking more in terms of like the bottles. Okay, everybody talks about the plastic bottles and the deposits that you can get back your nickel or dime. But wouldn't it be great if you could take your compost to one of these community gardens and get a tomato or one of the hundreds of zucchini that are being offered by the bushes in the garden, and instead of getting a deposit on a bottle, you could kind of help the food desert issue by getting a piece of fresh produce.
I want to pick up on that comment because I happen to live in New York, New York City, and New York City had a very robust composting program where there's all these farmer markets, and I believe the organization is Grow New York City, would have a compost collection bin at each of these farmer markets. And my wife and I would always collect our compost, and when we couldn't make it down there, we would just throw them in the freezer for a couple of days at a time. And then when we had enough, we would walk on down to the farmer's market and drop a compost. It's kind of funny that as I talk, one of the things that she's actually doing is we're doing a lot of textile recycling. We had been away for a while and we're just kind of going through all our clothes and we're looking to recycle everything. But anyway, back to my original point is that when the pandemic hit and financial considerations came into it and loss of tax revenue, the first thing they did was they cut a lot of the recycling programs. So the composting programs have been scaled back considerably. The textile recycling has been cut back considerably. So the question is, during a time when there's financial hardships, during times where there's budget issues, during times when people are having trouble paying for the things they need to pay for, how do we incentivize governments to continue to support programs like composting and textile recycling and other types of recycling?
Thank you. I think Brooke has a question. I'm sorry, I can't see the hand. I don't think I see the raise hand feature.
That's all right. I had a feeling it wasn't working with the slides up, so I just took it down. In regards to fixing the recycling problem, I think there's a big problem with people not understanding what's recyclable, and I think that kind of goes outside of your basics of bottles and plastics. Like, I'm growing a lot of bacteria in my house right now. I have a bottle of saline, DNA extract, I have crystal violet. These are all, well, crystal violet's toxic, but these are non-toxic. And I don't know what to do with the bottles after. I have all these plastic bottles. And then the question comes down to, what do I do with hazardous waste? Like this gram decolorizer is hazardous, can cause cancer, but it's in a plastic bottle. So what about items like this?
I'll check the bottom of your bottles, and you should see a number on it, like on the bottom, like underneath. My bad. There should be like a 5 or I think a 7.
Okay. So then what do you do with those numbers?
So 5s can be, I think 5s can be recyclable. My last check. And hazardous waste, you have to go somewhere that, I'm sorry to say, like deals with hazardous waste. Like over the summer, I had hydrochloric acid from my chemistry experiments for chem class for summer, and they made everything home. So I had to go somewhere special to drop off hydrochloric acid because it is a scary chemical. Am I right, Melvin? Melvin agrees. He's a biochem. I listen to him more than anything, to be honest.
Right. You're on the right track.
So you have to find a place like most like community colleges has a place like a bin for hazardous waste you put in.
Which I think is really cool. And I think there's common household items that are hazardous, such as paints and stuff like that. But I think it's inconvenient for most people. I know I personally would not drive to dispose of 3 bottles. I would not drive to a different location to do it. I think there's a big issue in terms of access to proper areas to recycle.
And we have noticed that. Like I live in a small town. I live in a small town in Pine Beach. It's South Jersey Shore. And they just took away, they're trying to cut down garbage, I think, because they just took away one of our garbage bins and they're charging us $90 a month, even though we had that garbage bin since we've been here. And that was like 1990s or something like that. So it's just crazy. Like they're trying to change things on the spot without letting us know. So hopefully we could see an increase in information, an increase in how to properly dispose of everyday items. Like I have paint sitting in the kitchen underneath a cabinet that we haven't touched in years.
Do you think
we actually I'm sorry, Brooke, please continue.
Sorry, no, I was just kind of getting curious. So I'm in vet med. I was recently accepted to Mississippi College of Veterinary Medicine, so I'll be starting there in June.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So something that's obviously I do every day when I go to work, we throw out a lot of plastic syringes, lots of gloves. These are hazardous. They can't be recycled. Is there any studies or research being done to be applied to the fields of vet med or human med about ways that we could contribute to recycling? Because we have a lot of stuff that we can't, they're all single-use products and we can't reuse them for sterile purposes. So is that being investigated at all?
I mean, so far as going to my knowledge is no. It's kind of like the problem with food is unfortunately like it's kind of like it's put into law, I believe, that you can't really reuse, especially when it comes to blood and the tissues is a very that's a very kind of like even I couldn't even say like kind of like controversial, and it's so dipped in and even put into law that you just cannot recycle stuff for safety purposes. This is also part of the reason that like that even food, you know, restaurants aren't allowed to just give out the foods after dinner, even though after, you know, after their daily, you know, kind of like sales, usually, you know, most of these fast food restaurants have to dump those food, but then they're not allowed to even give them out to other people and stuff. So it's like, unfortunately, it's like those laws like that are being placed that just kind of prevents that whole idea to even kind of consider how to make those how to make them recycle. So it's kind of like it's going to need like a massive change of policy in terms of even, you know, starting to consider you know, those recycling, especially like how we said with the syringes, the little plastics. Like you're totally correct. Like I was thinking the similar thing, like why can we not use it? But it's because in terms of like sensitivity and, you know, not wanting to get sued, that most of these companies won't even, you know, consider or touch upon like trying to recycle those products.
I'm sorry, I didn't phrase it correctly, or I didn't, I said recycle. I didn't quite mean recycle. I meant more so of using sustainable products. Like I know earlier we mentioned the use of hemp products. Sorry, I kind of steered you on the wrong path with that.
Okay.
Take that.
No, I thought it was like, you know, we were recycling. So, I have right now. I have, to my knowledge, you know, I haven't seen any like in terms of innovative things to kind of replace, like how we said and stuff. I mean, if you think about it, kind of makes sense because it's like we're still in the like companies that produce, you know, environmental friendly byproducts and all these other where they be recycled or good for the environment is very recent. And you know, it's like how we talked, like the previous presentations with the microplastics. Is companies that, you know, with us, first of all, it's more expensive and kind of like producing like an inconvenience, and it's just new. It hasn't been around. These new type of products haven't been around long, so like from that I can infer that not yet. But you see, this is why we're here in this conference, you know, having this talk and stuff. You know, one of us might be, you know, the next discoverer like of those type of products that can, you know, change the medical field and stuff, so that we can, like, you know, use equipment that are not harmful or hazardous, you know, to the environment. But that was a great question. unfortunately right now is, you know, we're still companies and industries are still young in terms of, you know, having those type of system run. I'm thinking.
Thank you
Wow.
so much, Melvin. And Joshua is really a fantastic presentation, really learned a lot. It is now the time that we're up to the last 15 minutes of the session time. And I think it's a good point where we can kind of just summarize, what did we learn? What are the key takeaways from this session? Just what comments do you guys, what discussion do you want to have concerning what was presented today? Just start speaking. People don't have to raise their hand. Just jump on in.
I first like to say thank you for Sandra and Kelsey for interpreting, and I like to say nice job, Dakota. I really learned a lot about microplastics, and I did not know a lot compared to a YouTube video I saw yesterday. Thank you so much.
One thing I do want to do before we head out is I do want to take a screenshot. So if people are willing and able to, as we have this discussion, just turn on your cameras for a second and smile and wave hi and, you know, look really happy, like, oh my God, we learned so much and this was just the greatest thing ever. So I'll be taking the screenshot in the next couple of seconds. But continue to talk. What else did people learn? What are the key takeaways? How are your behaviors going to change in the future based upon what we've done today?
I could speak briefly on this. I think something that we can take from today, something that they mentioned earlier was they were talking about Earth Day, you know, and that was kind of the day that we all start to think about the environment. But really, we should be pushing ourselves to be more considerate about the space that we live in, beyond, you know, just this one day or even like a whole month. It has to be something that, in order for it to be something that's sustainable, we need to, one, make that first part in being sustainable ourselves and being consistent in how we address matters like this.
Ashley, I see your point on how to address it, and the one thing I'm noticing is since quarantine happened, a lot of communities have been increasing. Like Nintendo Switch came out with Animal Crossing during the beginning of COVID, and it taught people how to take care of an island and know how to use resources and use money and upgrading sort of things. And I just want to give you a sneak peek. I'm doing an independent research project with my IT department because I'm a senior STA person at the college for IT, and I'm hopefully working on a game where I could take my college and put them inside a video game and show how we could increase stuff through environment and through small basic things. But everything still has not got finalized, and hopefully I can start very soon.
You know,
More comments?
I love the presentation, and actually, I forgot who started talking about the microplastics and about like microbes degrading plastic, and that kind of put me curious, and I just put it in the chat. Like, there's an actual article, like there's actually German scientists actually discovered a bacteria that degrades, you know, plastics, and the link is actually in the chat right now. Like, you know, that common curious was like, I'm pretty sure they discovered bacteria, like there's a bacteria somewhere out there that degrades plastic. So, and you know, it turns out there is. So the link, I put the link in the chat. So I mean, that's great news. But it's you see, you know, and it's just recently discovered. I mean, this article is literally, I believe, came out in March of 2020. So So now we know that there are actual microbes out there that, degrade and consume plastics, for and use it as a fuel source. So yeah. But as you can see, like how I was trying to say previously, all these innovations are very, new and recent. So like these companies are starting to play. So now since now we actually know that there's there's actual bacterium and microbe, it's only a matter of time to like, the same way how bacteria have been processing like in medicine and stuff to kind of like produce medicine and kind of like yeast, we can kind of try to use those same bacteria that degrade plastic and mass produce them in order so that they can degrade those plastics faster and stuff like that. So there's a hope for a better future. That's what I'm trying to say.
I want to jump on that. I think there may be, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think there's more than one microbe, because I remember I'm in microbiology right now, and at the beginning of the semester, we were talking a lot about remediation. And I don't remember if we talked about a specific microbe. We were talking about microbes in general that are used to break down hazardous waste. So I believe there may be a few, but I can't tell you off the top of my head because I do not remember.
This was a comment I was going to make before. I don't know if it quite fits in at this point of the presentation, but I'll make it anyways. So people are talking about using reusable water bottles as opposed to using plastic water bottles and having water refill stations and water fountains. It's interesting to think about that in the times of the pandemic when it actually was people were told not to use water fountains, where people were told not to use refillable water stations, and people were told to use one-time use plastic water bottles because that was considered healthier in terms of stopping the transmission of the virus. And also think about all the masks that people wear and the potential waste coming from a lot of these surgical masks and N95 masks. And one of the things that's unfortunately a little bit of a negative about my dog is that he likes to chew and swallow things. And he is an expert at finding masks thrown about all over the ground and then trying to swallow them and then spitting them back up 2 days later. So it's just interesting that in today's society, we are actively encouraged to do things that are actually a little bit counterintuitive compared to what we've learned in the past. Not I'm saying that we're encouraged to take our masks and throw them all over the place, but we have these masks that are protecting us in one way, but contributing to an environmental issue in a different way. And I don't know how we solve that conundrum.
I say cloth, like I own a bunch of masks. My mom's a nurse, so she has to own a lot of masks. And the biggest thing in the hospital was a reusable, like it looked like an N95 mask that you could wash and sanitate. The only thing you had to do was buy filters for it. So that was like a big increase. And especially when COVID started and everyone wanted an N95 mask for reselling, that was a huge issue. So it was great to see how someone invented a framework using mostly a 3D printer, like using tiny plastic strings like this. And now people's like, oh, you're wasting plastic using a 3D printer. Well, this is a reusable plastic that a brand called Polymaker uses. So it uses reusable plastic to help the environment. So, and like stuff can be like, you go from sticky note stand to all the way to like an actual mask or a strap for your mask, which is really interesting to see.
For me, I just kind of started using the cloth masks that we can just kind of go as soon as like I have a good pile of like cloth masks that I could just throw it in the washer and then dry it up, and then it's like I'm good to go for the reminder of my days, and kind of stop using the N95s just to kind of in terms of just to be more aware in terms of that, waste, like the plastic waste from like wearing the N95 mask. So that's what I did. I just kind of started, using the more clothes mask. personally.
I also use cloth masks, but I kind of agree with what you said before, kind of backtracking. Not really everything can be reusable due to trying to keep things clean, like in the medical field. I was recently getting my rabies vaccines, and every time I went into the hospital, even though I was wearing my own face mask, they had to give me a disposable one to put on top of that.
Right.
Sorry, you can go first, Kelsey. Sorry.
I was interpreting what one of the deaf participants was saying. I wasn't commenting directly.
You can interpret. My bad. Sorry.
Well, we're only down for the last couple of minutes. So any concluding final thoughts?
I just had a quick question for the Gallaudet University students. Since masks been into effect, has that affect your, if you don't mind, your communication towards other people who sadly don't know a lot about sign language?
Yes, definitely. Alexis is saying, and Haley's agreeing. Oh, yeah, definitely. And this is Dakota. I just wanted to mention, right, that a lot of people, know the deaf people at times can try to lip read. Lip reading isn't super effective anyway. What is nice about masks is it forces people to realize that deaf people aren't going to be able to lip read them with a mask, and they have to be more creative and gesture or write back and forth and do things that are generally more effective to communicate with deaf people anyway, instead of just expecting deaf people to lip read. And this is Alexis. I wanted to add to that as well, that some people who are deaf and have, for example, cochlear implants or hearing aids, it can hear some, are struggling to understand people more than before. Like Dakota said, we have to figure out other options. Like for me, I have more listening fatigue as a person who has some access to sound. It's just more exhausting by the end of the day because I have to work so much harder to understand hearing people that don't sign. And I've tried asking them to wear the clear masks that are out there, but sometimes people don't want to be accommodating, and that's really frustrating.
I'm really sorry to hear that. And hopefully by next semester, if we're in person more, as I'm class president of 2022, so I'm hopefully I can incorporate sign language into some of my events because I want to make everyone feel equal. Like Melvin is from Tanzania, and I want to learn more about the way he talks with people in our sister charity who's also from Tanzania. So I always ask Melvin for help about learning new words so I can talk to new people. So I'll keep that in incorporation of using clear mask and hopefully learning more about sign language. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, we're pretty much out of time. So I just want to thank everyone. It really was enlightening. It really was tremendously informative. I know I personally learned a lot. It sounds like everyone here learned a lot. I did post the screenshots I took in the chat. So if you wanted to take a look at the screenshots and save them for whatever your own personal usage are, be my guest. Obviously, I will be shutting the Zoom session down once over. So if you want to grab those screenshots or save them, you got to do so quickly, or just let me know and I'll wait before I shut the Zoom down. I hope you guys have had a wonderful start to your conference. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Obviously, there are plenty of events coming up in the afternoon. We have the keynote speaker at 12 o'clock. So hopefully everyone was planning to attend the keynote speaker at noon. We have our afternoon sessions. I know we have a student, I believe, dance party, if I remember correctly, tonight, going back to zooming to the 80s, I believe the theme is. So I want to thank everyone for everything that they've done. And we will be sending out a conference feedback form either Monday or Tuesday. So please take the time to fill out our survey so that way we can learn what we did well and what are some things we might be able to improve upon the next time we do this. Although hopefully in 2022, we'll be together in person in Philadelphia as opposed to doing this virtually on Zoom. So again, thank you, everyone. If there's anything you need, please hang out, and I'm happy to talk. But thanks to all the presenters. You guys really did a fantastic job.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Be well.